Well, here we are. Good morning. Welcome to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph, and I am the host of this show. And once again, my glasses are crooked. Since the frame got bent, it's very difficult to keep them straight now. But we can do what we can do, right? So we're here this morning to do an episode of Into the Progverse. This is the show we are on now, which is those. Oh, sorry. This isn't Into the Progverse. I'm a few hours early. This is a Sunday morning breakfast meeting. Uh, yeah, yeah, not Into the Progverse. I don't know what I was thinking there. Today we're going to be talking about those albums that came out in the 80s when music started to change that you weren't sure about. You didn't know whether you liked them or you wanted to like them or you didn't or you didn't like them but you bought them anyways. Those kind of things, right? So I'm not going to start just yet because we're still a little bit early. Cheers. I want to get my mind into the right frame here. For whatever reason, I had the prog verse in my head. So we're going to do. I've only picked out 5 albums. Probably could have picked out a lot more, but 5 will kind of illustrate the point. And then if people want to bring up albums that, hey, well, welcome to the page. People want to bring up albums that fit the bill, they can do that as well. Or you can just bring up whatever you want. That's usually what happened on this show. So today, for those people who will be joining us, we'll be talking about albums that I got and I wasn't sure about. Whether I thought I could have wasted money. I wasn't sure I wanted to like them. I wasn't sure if I did like them. Some of them I did, some of them not so much. Some of them I liked initially, but kind of lost interest in them later in time. But I've only picked out 5. Like I said, I could have easily picked out another 10, but these will do for the beginning. So we'll start with this bottom one, because this one, to me, is the poster child for this. Asia. And it would help if I get it right side up. So this was Asia's debut album. Big, massive hit. Did a lot of sales. The album cover, of course, is really good, as most of their album covers are. I didn't know really what to expect when this album came out. I knew it was I thought it was a progressive supergroup. That was my first error. My second error is I thought with the musicians playing on this band, this is going to be something special. And I have to admit, for a period of time, maybe the first 5 or 6 months, I kind of liked the album. I kind of, once I got used to the idea that it wasn't going to be Yes or King Crimson or ELP or anything like that, once I got used to it, I didn't mind it. It was decent enough. And even after it kind of faded for me, I thought, okay, so I've listened to it for 6 months, so I've kind of lost a little bit of interest in it. What happened next was that I would go back to some of the songs, Cutting It Fine, Without You, Soul Survivor, Only Time Will Tell, Heat of the Moment. They're all decent enough tracks. I would go back to them periodically. And every time I went back to them, I said to myself, this is very commercial, extremely commercial sounding. And it really was, in some ways, a big disappointment because it wasn't what I hoped for. You know, when you have a John Wetton and Steve Howe and Carl Palmer in a band, you're expecting this thing to be an instrumental masterpiece. And what it was a commercial masterpiece. So it did well. It sold very well. They were aiming at a different crowd of people who like that crisp sound that you get from these guys. Are all excellent musicians. That crisp sound that they came out with, which is very commercial sounding, poppy, with a little bit of a maybe a power pop feel to it at times, but definitely there was no, to my knowledge, there is very little, if any, progressive elements on this music at all. And so now, almost, this came out in 1982, so 44 years later, my take on this album is very different. So yes, it's clean sounding. The artwork is still good, although it's a little bit sterile. It really is. It is sterile like the album. So it it's not that it isn't good, but it definitely looks artificial. It doesn't look real at all. And the music is the same. So that's the way I'm viewing this now. I see this album as a bit of a lazy attempt by these guys to produce music. They just wanted, they were going for the money is what they were going for, and they were going for that commercial success. They wanted to be making a ton of dough, and they did. So for them, my hat's off to them. But they never came and said that, though. They never said, "Oh, we're not going to be a progressive band anymore." They let people believe what they want. So they got the new people who didn't know who they were and just liked the music, and then you got people who were kind of hoping they would be something else, and they weren't. So anyways, that's just kind of my take on it. So when I say that this is an album I'm not sure about, well, back then I was in on it initially because it was who it was. And then I wasn't so sure about it after I'd listened to it a while. I guess in the back of my mind, I was going, this is not what I hoped for. But maybe it'll get better. That's kind of the frame I had. Of course, it never did. And this was the only album by them that I purchased. They got me for one. I've never owned another one, nor had any interest in owning another one. I think I've listened to a couple of them because Ben has given them to me as album challenges or in band battles or something like that. But other than that, I have not followed them at all under any circumstances. Boy, I don't seem to be able to get these glasses straight today. There. Anyways, so that's my take on that album. So we're going to move on to another one. So this one maybe a little bit harder to digest as to what I feel about it, but we'll go into it. So this is Queen's jazz album, released in 1978. Actually, it doesn't belong on this list, so we'll throw it out. I was thinking it was a 1980 release, but then I realized it wasn't. But this one definitely is a 1980 release, so we will talk about it. This is Duke from Genesis. So kind of the first album in that post progressive rock era, if you count. And then there were three as a progressive album, which I think it is. It's just not as strong a progressive album as the predecessors. But good morning. Well, yeah, so I'm not sure that this is a progressive album. Yes, it has a lot of progressive elements on it. For sure it does. I've tried, this one is a bit of a different problem than the Asia album. I've tried many times to like this album, and I just don't. There's a couple of tracks on it. Coincidentally, they're the two radio-friendly pop tracks that did very well. Turn It On Again, Misunderstanding. I kind of like both of them, but the progressive elements of the album, I just don't care for. To me, it seems kind of weak. Maybe over time it'll eventually come around to me, but it never really has. And I've owned it. This particular disc I've owned for a while, but I've listened to this album for years at different times. I'll listen to the entire thing and see if I've changed, and nothing ever changes. It's the same. So I wasn't sure about it when it first came out. I'm less sure about it now. But I keep giving it a chance because people tell me it's more progressive than its predecessor. It does have a couple of pop tracks on it, Misunderstanding and Turn It On Again, like I said. But for the most part, it's pretty progressive. But I just don't feel like this is going to go anywhere with this album. I don't really like the art either. It seems kind of similar to the Asia art in some ways. maybe not as sophisticated, but still kind of stereo, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just minimalized, I guess is the best way to put it. This one has even more of that, in my opinion, just very flat. Yeah, and if you don't like Genesis, or if you don't like that pop Genesis of the 1980s, you won't like this one either. At least I don't. Okay, the next album up is this one, The Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms. So this one I've done one where I liked initially and then I didn't like, and then I did the second one, which I tried to like and I didn't like. And then this one I didn't like and I've grown to like. So you can see where we're going with this, right? Trying to do different things about not being sure. So I wasn't sure about this album initially. It wasn't really in my wheelhouse when it comes to albums. I really don't. The guitar part I don't mind, but the color scheme here is not really to my liking. The pink and blue, they don't really go together, first of all. And then you can't read the writing. Like, that's difficult to read. It's kind of not, like, it's too pastel. These are two pastel colors that to me don't really go together. And it makes it difficult to look at the album. And that's part of the reason why I didn't buy it. I just thought it was a bit of an eyesore. I also had heard their music before and thought, it's a little poppy, a little bit lame. I don't know that I want to go there with it. And so my reaction to this was kind of the opposite of the Asia album. The Asia album I was wholly in on and looking forward to, and then disappointed. And this one I was wholly didn't want to get into and found myself liking this album. So I like this album quite a bit. All the tracks from top to bottom. I think this is their best album. Well, it's their best album that I'm familiar with. I probably listened to 2 or 3 of their albums. I probably own like 2 or 3 of them, but I like this one easily the best. Just a strong album with some really good tracks, and not just the So Far Away and Money for Nothing and those type of tracks, which are, commonly known and liked. But some of the deeper cuts are good on this too. Ride Across the River, I like that one. Your Latest Trick. These are decent tracks. This is not an overwhelmingly strong album for me, but it's much better than I gave it credit for initially. And so even though I wasn't sure about it initially, eventually I did give it a chance, and it's done well. I think it's done pretty well. So that's the Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms. I'm going to pick another album to replace the jazz one because actually, I'm not sure what one I would grab. So we'll just leave it. We'll just leave it with the 4 today. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I do kind of like it, but when I'm looking for something to listen to, it isn't one of the first albums I think of. It is for the Dire Straits. If I feel like listening to a Dire Straits album, that's the one I generally go to. Okay, the last album that I have here is this one from Pete Townsend, which I believe came out in 81. If I'm wrong, somebody will correct me, but I'm pretty sure it did. This is Empty Glass. So this one's kind of a little bit of both of these scenarios. You've got, so with the Asia scenario, you've got the album I was really enthusiastically into, I kind of liked, and then became disappointed in, and then just don't listen to. The Dire Straits, I was not interested in, didn't want to go there. Eventually, I did go there and found out that I liked it quite a bit. This one's kind of a little bit of both. So initially, I liked it. I liked Let My Love Open the Door. That was kind of the song that kind of made me interested in it. The Rough Boys wasn't one that I really kind of liked. Thought it had some elements that I wasn't really crazy about. So I was kind of half on and half off, but I didn't like it enough to buy it. The album cover is not too bad. This back part, not really sure what they're trying to gather at that, but anyways, once I got it, which is not too long ago, like maybe 3 years ago, so it took me a long time to go out and buy this. I thought it would be a pop album that I didn't really care for too much, but it's actually not too bad. It is a pop album for sure, but the tracks on it are not too bad. Did decently well in my playlist. I've always liked Pete Townshend's take on lyrics and stuff. I always liked his kind of almost punky like style and guitar like tones. However, this album is both. It both has better than I thought it was going to be, but also a bit of a disappointment too, if that makes any sense. So I kind of like it, but I don't love it, is another word to put it. So I don't know what to say more about this album than and the other thing about this album too that I completely forgot about is this was kind of his first Sondre. I think he might have done one album before this. I don't remember, but this was one of his earlier Sondrins into his own. And it's not, to me, it's not a coincidence that the two Who albums that followed this, It's Hard and Face Dances, are both not too dissimilar from this album. Not really. Maybe a little more bitey. The It's Hard is a little bit more bitey than this one. The other one, maybe not even as much. This one is Empty Glass. I think this is this is his first solo album. There may have been one before it, but it's not coming to mind at this point in time. And he had a couple of hits off of this, Rough Boys and Let My Love Open the Door, both decent enough. A Little Is Enough is good too. Cat in the Cupboard is kind of quirky. I don't mind that one. And Keep on Working, all pretty decent tracks. So it's a kind of love-hate album. I kind of like some of it, but I also don't like some of it. And I don't really talk too much about it because I just think that it's a bit overrated. I think it is. It's not as good as I thought it was going to be, although it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's not as good as people say it is what I'm trying to say. It's not as good as it's not as good as people say it is, but I think it's better than I originally thought it was. Those are the four I've talked about. Some of the other ones that come to mind. So Kiss did an album in 1979 called Dynasty. And then the follow-up to that album was supposed to be very similar to it, but just kind of is just... At the time, I liked it because I thought it was very similar to Dynasty, although I wasn't a huge Dynasty fan either. But I thought this is just another attempt at Dynasty, but it's not even as good as Dynasty. None of the tracks on it are terribly memorable. There's a couple of decent tracks on there. Mostly the Paul stuff is pretty good. Some of the Ace stuff isn't too bad. Torpedo Girl, Tomorrow from Paul Stanley. And I can't remember any of the Gene Simmons stuff at all. So that's how good it was. So it's an album I bought initially, and I played it quite a bit. Very kind of a similar scenario to the Asia album. Very similar kind of setup. So I kept thinking, okay, maybe Kiss will bounce back a little bit. And then when I heard it, I thought, okay, so it's another Dynasty album. But it really isn't the Dynasty album even. It's just kind of a weaker sister of Dynasty, and maybe in some ways their worst album. Now, I don't know about the stuff that came out after Lick It Up. I never bought any of that stuff. They were going in a direction I don't want to go. But I don't think that their albums were necessarily that bad. They're just not style of music that I really cared to listen to. Even actually kind of going a little bit into that grunge feel too. But definitely of those early 80s albums, The Elder, Unmasked, Lick It Up, Creatures of the Night, those 4 albums come to mind. I think this is easily the weakest of those albums. And yet, when I first got it, I liked it quite a bit. I listened to it. It was a regular play for me for a while. And then once I kind of burned out on it, I've never really ever returned to it. And I don't even own it. It's not that I've looked for it to buy it, but I never see it around. And I don't, it's not the first thing that comes to mind when I'm looking for albums. But if I saw it for a reasonable price, I would probably get it just to add to my collection. That and The Elder. I think The Elder was a better album, just misguided in a lot of ways. This is not a band that should have gone in that direction. I mean, I can understand they were trying to make themselves relevant in the 80s, so they tried several different approaches. And ironically, the one that I think worked was the Creatures of the Night album, and they just didn't continue with it. So who knows? Who knows what was going on? Probably one of their heavier albums, though. Anyways, just in general, that Unmasked album, when I look back about it, I wasn't too sure about whether I liked it or not, but I kept it to myself because I didn't want people to think I liked it. You know how we are when we're young, right? And so I kind of have drifted away from that album. So almost all these albums I've shown you today, I don't reach for very often unless I'm doing something specific like now, and none of them will get played today. I won't play any of them. To me, they're all low 3s. So a low 3 in my ranking is very simple. I've listened to you enough that you deserve to get a ranking. And I'll give you the lowest ranking you can get, which is a level 3, like a low level 3. So not really much potential. This one may be a little bit higher on that list. Maybe a mid-range 3, and this one at its best could be in even a 2, which is decent album. The other 2, definitely a low 3. This one is originally, this might have been as high as a 1, if you can believe that, but it's now down to like a low 3. I never reach for it. Rarely do I ever listen to it unless I'm doing something that requires me to do that. And there's a few other albums that come to mind too, that I didn't pull off the shelf. I was going to pull off the Whitesnake's 87 album. Initially a huge album for me, a big album. I liked it a lot, played it a lot, but I was always in the back of my mind, I always had this little disappointing feeling because it wasn't as good as some of the previous Whitesnake albums. It didn't measure up to a couple of their albums before that. And even though it was more bombastic and more commercial sounding with a lot of really catchy riffs and hooks, it just never was going to reach that plateau again. And then once I kind of played it for a while and it kind of burned out, I've never really thought of it as any more than a low level 2 album from an album that at one point I might have thought it could be a masterpiece, but just never went to that level. That's why I'm pretty strict about the masterpiece titles. Album has to at least be still in my wheelhouse in a 3 to 5 year period. If after that it's still up there and I still think it deserves it, then maybe it'll get in. But some albums for me have waited like literally decades to get that masterpiece title on it from me. The one that comes to mind is Black Sabbath's Mob Rules, which I always liked, but I never thought it deserved to be a masterpiece. And the reason that it's become a masterpiece is because some of the songs on it that I didn't care for have kind of taken off for me. The backside of the album, not so strong. And some of the stuff that I was into at the beginning, I don't listen too much, like Turn Up the Night and Voodoo, which were the 2 big tracks for me. Both don't get as much a listen, but I still think they're really good tracks. It's more Country Girl and Sign of the Southern Cross, Falling Off the Edge of the World. All these tracks have kind of beefed up the album to a point where I think it deserves to be in that upper echelon of albums. But that takes sometimes many years for an album to do that. Other albums do it almost fairly quickly. There's a couple that, some of the early albums that I discovered since I've been on this channel have been considered for masterpiece. There was a couple of them last year. I almost put one of them in, but decided I would give it another year because I wasn't so sure, because I hadn't been listening to it much. And I was thinking maybe it just doesn't hold water for me after I've listened to it for a while. And then what's considered to me is that there's so much stuff that I got to listen to that I just don't have time to be revisiting albums as much as I once did. So, when I was younger, as a teenager, I would play, and even more so when I was younger, I would play the same albums day in, day out, 10, 12 times a day. That just does not happen at all anymore. Even albums I really like, they might get a couple listens a week if I really like them. Maybe initially for the first week, I might play them 4 or 5 times. But after that, they kind of get into their rhythm. And even the best albums, the one that was on the top of my list for a long time there, Painkiller, even that was only getting 2, 3 listens a week. Now it's getting less than that. So before it burns out, I will pull it out. And hopefully, so for an album to get 100 or 200 listens to over its lifetime is a big deal now, where when I was younger, I've got albums I've listened to 1,000 times easily. But nobody will ever reach that again. It's just too much to listen to. You just can't listen to them all so much, right? Even if I listen to 6 or 7 albums a day over the course of a year, that's going to be maybe 1,400 or 1,500 or 2,000 listens, but that's going to be divided among 100 albums or 200 albums or maybe even 800 albums. Yeah, so definitely listening habits have changed. So maybe the way in which I decide on an album being a masterpiece has to be reconsidered and reevaluated too. I've got 67 masterpieces in my list. And then there's a whole whack of albums that are like ones, some high, some low ones that have to be considered yearly. I do it every year in the late August. I'll go through the albums and maybe I'll have like 18 or 20 in there that I think have to be considered. And then I consider them all over a month or two period before I decide on which ones get in. There's no set number either. It's however many. Last year, I think it was just 5. I don't think it's ever been more than 5. Oh, it might have been once. I think one time it was like 6 got in. But there's a whole whack of new ones that are become eligible this year as well. So that might have to change too. I might be putting a little bit more. And yeah, so that's it. It's the same with my favorite band. So I had an elite group of 7, I used to call it, and now that is expanded to 11. With my putting Iron Maiden in there back in the fall, and now putting Judas Priest in there in the last month or so. So now we have a total of 11 elite bands. These are bands that have a host of albums I love, or they're really great live, or I've been listening to them for a long time, or their sound has a penetrational part to me that is just beyond what a normal band can do. And so all 11 of the groups that are in there have that quality. I return to their albums regularly. When I say regularly, like weekly, I listen to most of these bands all the time. Even some bands whose albums I'm a little bit burned out, I still return to them on occasion too. Some of the bands have been in that list for a long time. Yes, Rush, Genesis, Styx, Black Sabbath, who've all been up there for a very long time. A lot of their albums have been played to death, and it's hard to go back to them. Sometimes I don't feel like it. I've been doing this Who thing, getting ready for the Who rankings. So a lot of these albums are getting a revisit. And some of the ones that are a little bit newer to me, I wouldn't say newer, but a lot of the tracks aren't as familiar as some of the other stuff, are getting a lot of attention because I'm doing this as well. One album of the ones that I hadn't been listening to, which is Quadrophenia, I always kind of had a bit of a negative view of this album. I think it's because I never fully embraced Tommy either. I like Tommy. I think it's a good album, but I think it's probably overrated in my opinion. And I always thought Quadrophenia was the same, but I'm thinking that I might be wrong on that. So I've been giving Quadrophenia a lot of attention lately to see if maybe I think it might be better than Tommy and might end up in a higher ranking when all's said and done. I'm pretty sure I know the albums that are going to be in the top, but there's a few that I'm not sure about in the middle and at the bottom. So pretty much that's it. That's the topic I wanted to talk about today. And, there's plenty of albums that I haven't mentioned that definitely fall into this kind of, I guess you might want to call it wishy-washy kind of feeling about them, where you kind of like them, but you don't. There may be reasons why. Maybe they're poppier than you thought, or maybe the music's different from what you thought it was going to be, or maybe you were embarrassed at what they did and didn't want anybody to know that you like them. That kind of thing. That happened when I was younger quite a bit, not so much now. And so that was my topic for today. Tonight's topic, into the prog verse, we will be doing prog albums released in 1984. I decided that, maybe Ben's right. Maybe we should continue and do a few more years into the 80s and some down the line from that, even just to show the difference in how prog music has grown over that time period. The 70s is always going to be the decade of fantastic prog. There's so much of it I still haven't even listened to. The 80s has some, but it's a very different style of prog. And then as they move forward, it becomes even more different. And that's the way it should be. It's prog, right? Yeah. So anyways, that's what we're going to be doing tonight, the year 1984 in prog music history. And we'll be talking about that then. Oh, hi, Takosis. Yeah, maybe. It's definitely one of my favorites. I like all four of those albums. We will be doing on the mini series this week on Tuesday. Will be a comparison between the first four Marillion albums against the Camel albums that start with Fugazi. That start with Mirage and go forward with Snow Goose, Moon Madness, and Rain Dances. So those four will go up against the Marillion, Script for a Jester's Tear, Fugazi, Childhood's End, and is it Childhood's End? I think I always get that mixed up with that Arthur C. Clarke title, and Clutches at Straws. So it'll be those four Marillion albums I'll be talking about versus the four Camel albums. Those are the runs that Ben has chosen for this episode. Yes. I do the same thing every time. I want to say Childhood's End. That's definitely the Arthur C. Clarke title. As soon as I say that, I say, okay, I know I got it wrong. And it's just a faux pas, or just a block in my brain that just refuses to accept that it's something other than what I think it is. So tonight we'll be talking about those albums released in 1984. I was going to do 83, but I already know what album will be in there. So I decided we'll go with 84 because I think some of the other prog bands started producing albums the year after Marillion started. There might be some that produced before. I'm not 100% sure. This is kind of a new area for me to explore. So we'll be doing that. Yeah, I've done that. So, yep. So I'm looking forward to that episode. I'll pick out as many as I can. Now, I do tend to stay away from the jazz fusion. I know that other people like that stuff a lot. A lot of prog people like that. I'm not fully on board with it. I do like some elements of it, but I like prog. And if it happens to have some jazz fusion elements in it, I'm okay with that. As long as it's not overboard on the jazz fusion, I'm usually okay with it. Yeah, everybody's a little bit different. Prog music, is very interchangeable with a lot of different, well, I wouldn't say actually interchangeable. I think it's just it's more accepting of other genres influencing it and getting in there, because I think that's just the nature of that type of music. Yeah, I was fully off board with Rush after Signals, but I came back to them. I had a guy who was a friend of mine who was a huge Rush fan, and he told me, "Oh yeah, they've kind of gone off that synth and they're back in this hard rock element." So I went, and now that was like a good 25 years after the, well, not even, maybe not that long, but a good 20 years after I kind of ditched them for a while. And then once my daughter was born, I had more opportunity to listen while I was working, and I started exploring a little bit of their discography. Um, the album Contact, or the Blue Album, I always get that one mixed up too. That's the one Rush album I can never remember the name of, but I got into it and I liked it. So then I started moving forward, and the first album I kind of bought was a few years later, was Snakes and Arrows, which I really liked, and it really brought Rush back to me full force. They had come back and were probably my favorite band from the time my daughter was born, but not with the grip they have now. They just didn't have it. But this album, Snakes and Arrows, brought me back, and then I went back out and got all of their stuff that I didn't have. Yeah, a lot of people think Hold Your Fire is a bit of a low point. I actually don't mind that album. Presto, on the other hand, is, along with Power Windows, are the two Rush albums that I just, I can't even rank them because I like them. I dislike them so much. I just can't. I can't listen to them. But we'll be talking about that tonight on Into the Progverse at 8 o'clock tonight. I'll be back live, and we'll be talking about some albums released in 1984. And obviously, there'll be at least one Rush album in there, anyways. If we will talk to you all there later. So please have yourself a good evening. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. If you want, you can leave comments about any of the albums that I talked about today, or other albums that you think kind of fit into this kind of topic that we had today. And we'll see you all tonight for Into the Progverse. Take care. Have yourself a good evening, and goodbye.